In the early hours of September 2nd, 1666, London slept peacefully under a blanket of stars, but inside a small bakery on Pudding Lane, a single spark was quietly plotting the city's undoing. A faint crackle from an unattended oven, the kind of sound that barely registers, soon grew into something unstoppable. Flames, relentless and hungry, tore through wooden beams, lighting up the night sky and plunging London into a nightmare. Within moments, chaos erupted. For 4 agonizing days, the Great Fire devoured over 13,000 homes, 87 churches, and even the legendary St. Paul's Cathedral. By the time the inferno was finally snuffed out, London was a smoldering ruin. But this wasn't just a disaster, it was a turning point. The Great Fire of London became a moment of reckoning, a crucible for transformation that reshaped the city and its destiny forever. How did this catastrophe spread so fast? What did it teach a city teetering on the edge of destruction about survival, innovation, and rebirth? Let's dive into the story of how London rose from the ashes. It all began with one ordinary, careless mistake in the bakery of Thomas Farriner. The summer of 1666 had been unusually dry, leaving the city's timbered buildings as brittle as kindling. Farriner likely thought little of the embers left in his oven that night, but as they caught fire, the flames spread with terrifying speed. Farriner and his maid barely escaped with their lives, their cries echoing through Pudding Lane. By the time anyone could respond, the fire was already an unstoppable juggernaut, tearing through the tightly packed streets like a predator on the prowl. By dawn, London had become unrecognizable. Thick, choking smoke blotted out the sun, casting an eerie twilight over the city. Families fled in every direction, pushing carts piled high with whatever they could save. Some tossed their possessions into the Thames, clinging to the desperate hope that water might shield their memories from the flames. One eyewitness described the fire as leaping like a lion, a predator that seemed almost alive in its fury. But how did a single blaze spiral so wildly out of control? The answer lay in the city itself. London's medieval architecture was a fire's playground. Narrow streets acted like wind tunnels, feeding oxygen to the flames, while overhanging upper floors provided a perfect path for the fire to leap from building to building. A strong wind from the east turned the fire into a beast, driving it deeper into the city. Iconic landmarks like the Royal Exchange and St. Paul's Cathedral were no match for the inferno. Witnesses reported that the cathedral's lead roof melted under the intense heat, sending molten rivers of metal cascading into the streets below. As for fire defenses, they were practically non-existent. Water was scarce and firefighting equipment was primitive at best. Bucket brigades formed along the Thames, ordinary citizens working together in a desperate attempt to slow the blaze. Men, women, and even children passed buckets hand to hand, their faces slick with soot and sweat. But the fire moved faster than they could, and its searing heat drove many back. Leadership didn't fare much better. Sir Thomas Bloodworth, the Lord Mayor of London, famously dismissed the fire as manageable, brushing it off as a minor inconvenience. His hesitation proved disastrous, allowing the flames to spread unchecked. It wasn't until King Charles II personally intervened that drastic measures, like using gunpowder to create firebreaks, were implemented. Entire streets were deliberately sacrificed to stop the fire's advance. And finally, after 4 relentless days, the flames burned themselves out, leaving behind a city in utter ruins. The scale of the destruction was staggering. Over 70,000 people were left homeless, their lives reduced to ash. Families camped out in open fields or along the riverbank, staring at the blackened skyline that had once been their home. London, a city of timbered rooftops and spired churches, was now a wasteland. But here's the thing about tragedy, it often clears the way for transformation. The Great Fire of London wasn't just an end, it was a beginning. In the smouldering aftermath, London found an opportunity to rebuild itself, not just physically, but in spirit. It was a chance to learn, to innovate, and to rise stronger than before. The first step was clearing the rubble, a daunting task on its own. But soon, visionaries like Sir Christopher Wren came forward with bold ideas for a new London. Wren reimagined the city with wider streets, open spaces, and buildings made of brick and stone. These materials, though costlier, were far more resistant to fire than timber. Wren's crowning achievement was the redesign of St. Paul's Cathedral, transforming it into a masterpiece of resilience and grandeur, a symbol of the city's rebirth. urban planning became a priority. Streets were widened to prevent another firestorm, and strict regulations banned the use of timber in construction. Fire safety wasn't just an afterthought anymore, it became law. What London achieved wasn't just reconstruction, it was reinvention, laying the foundations for the modern city we recognize today. The lessons of 1666 didn't just stay in London, they rippled outward, shaping how cities around the world approached urban planning and fire safety. The Great Fire of London forced society to confront hard truths about tradition, progress, and adaptability. It was a reminder that even in the face of devastating loss, resilience and creativity can spark incredible change. So next time you wander through London's open squares or admire the majestic dome of St. Paul's Cathedral, take a moment to remember, the fire that could have destroyed everything instead became the spark that transformed a city. It's living proof that even in our darkest hours, the seeds of rebirth are waiting to take root.